Hi there. Today, we're once again diving into a true crime case that happened right here in the U.S., one you might have never heard of. This story took place in Pleasanton, California. It's the case of Ernest Sheerer. With cruelty that goes beyond fiction. Listen closely to understand what really happened. A trail of blood crawled across the white wool carpet, winding like a snake slithering from its nest. It stretched from the wooden staircase down to the base of the dining table, then vanished beneath the bench by the window. A window still cracked open to let in the morning breeze. The sheer curtain fluttered gently, brushing against the blood like a hand trying to erase what had already been revealed. Dawn spilled in from the east, illuminating the dew-covered glass, casting vague shapes and shadows, as if the house itself was trying to shut its eyes, refusing to see its own reflection. On the opposite wall, a wedding photo that had hung perfectly framed for nearly 30 years now hung askew. Above it, a blood stain smeared across the edge of the wooden frame, dripping down over the woman's face in the photo, smudging the red lipstick. Red, as if she were still there, still breathing, still alive, still smiling. Charlene and Ernest Sheerer lived in an affluent community in Pleasanton, California. They were the model couple until they were brutally murdered in their own home. Beaten beyond recognition, then had their throats slashed while still in their pajamas. The case stunned the entire neighborhood. There were no signs of forced entry. But there was a massive debt and a desperate son. Welcome to Cold Radio, where we explore the final 30 days of a victim's life before tragedy strikes. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe and stay close as we uncover real cases from across the U.S. and the hidden heartbreaks behind them. And if you've been here before, welcome back. Let's continue the story. The first body lay in the hallway between the living room and the kitchen, back turned outward, legs crossed, left wrist slashed deeply. Blood had pooled into a dark purplish ring around the wound, like a wildflower blooming in the wrong place. Her ivory nightgown was stained red, its worn fabric still clinging to a few silver strands of hair. A wooden bead bracelet had snapped, with 5 beads scattered around her. One nestled in the shriveled palm of her hand, as if she'd tried to hold on to it until the very end. The second body was found near the stairs, face down on the hardwood floor, right hand clenched tightly, fingernails dug deep into the skin. He wore gray striped pajama pants, bare feet. A pool of blood beneath his neck spread like an arch, darkening toward the wall where a wooden plaque hung, carved with the words, "Family First," now stained halfway in blood, glowing under the faint wall light like a twisted gospel. There were no broken doors, no pried safes. Everything was intact to an almost absurd degree. The fridge was closed, the stove clean, the air conditioner humming steadily, and the vintage radio still played crackling classical music. A concerto, now sounding more like the wheeze of a heart that had just stopped beating. The first person to enter was a young police officer newly transferred to the area less than 3 months ago. He would later tell colleagues that what frightened him wasn't the blood. It was the perfect silence of the house. As if even the house itself was holding its breath, afraid to awaken what still lingered. He heard no crying, saw no signs of struggle. Only the smell, metallic and damp, old pillows, cheap perfume hanging in the air, the scent of clotted blood in the morning breeze. The neighbor's dog had barked nonstop since 2 a.m. The neighbor thought it was a stray cat. But in truth, the dog had been staring through the gap in the fence, right at the dining room, where Charlene's slippers were still neatly placed by the cabinet. But Charlene was no longer there, and that subtle dissonance, was more chilling than all the blood. Security cameras caught nothing. The system had been shut off hours earlier. But a neighbor's doorbell cam recorded flickering lights on the second floor at exactly 12:37 a.m. And then, darkness. Silence. No one exited the front door. No engine started. Only the hallway light stayed on longer than usual, like a routine preserved until the very last second. That light, too, went out at 1:04 a.m., and from that moment on, the house fell completely still. No screams, no calls for help, no shattered windows. Just two elderly people found dead in their own home, in their sleepwear, in a space that had once been a sacred ground of love and family. A detective quietly stepped through the living room, glancing at a framed photo on the table, taken last Thanksgiving. The whole family gathered around the dinner table, smiling. Charlene in a red sweater, Ernest pouring wine, the youngest grandchild grinning beside a candle. And in that photo, no one knew they had just shared their final meal together. There was no robbery, no signs of intrusion, no evidence of an outsider. Every trace pointed to someone who had once been welcomed into that home. Once loved, once trusted, once had their own key. But to understand how someone could murder their own parents in silence and then calmly walk away, without leaving a note, without taking $1, without wiping away all the evidence, only cleaning the doorknob and neatly arranging the pillows on the sofa. We have to go back 30 days. Charlene had a habit of waking up early, about 20 minutes before the sun. She never needed an alarm. The creak of the old wooden floor beneath Ernest's feet whenever he stirred was enough to rouse her. She would get up and brew peppermint tea in a cream-colored porcelain cup, its rim chipped from a Christmas Eve 10 years ago. A flaw that made it her favorite. It wasn't perfect, but it held warmth for a long time. She'd sit at the dining table without turning on the lights or the radio, simply listening to the rustle of leaves outside and the soft tick of the wall clock, like a gentle reminder. Be still, live slowly. For one more day. She used to be an accounting teacher, over 30 years at the community college. Her voice wasn't loud, but firm enough to make students put away their phones and start taking notes. She wasn't strict, just principled. She once told her daughter, "I don't teach people to be good at math. I just want them to stop fearing it." She never made her students take extra lessons, but she stayed after class every Friday afternoon, for those who struggled, and even for those who understood nothing except the fear of being expelled for low grades. She never called herself kind, but once let a student sleep on the office couch because their dorm had no electricity. She never told anyone about that. Not ever. The wool scarf she wore each winter was hand-knitted by her husband, Ernest, a former school board member who had never touched yarn before. But he learned from YouTube just to gift her something you can't buy with money. That scarf still hangs over the back of the living room sofa. Only now, no one wears it. Ernest was stubborn, principled, and argumentative. He could debate for 30 minutes over why handwriting should slant to the right to show openness. He'd complain about how the neighbors mowed their lawn, yet secretly fixed their porch light without leaving a name. He was the only one on the block who still wrote handwritten Christmas letters to each household every year, each one with a brand new joke, never repeated. Charlene and Ernest were far from perfect. They once argued loudly in church because he forgot the hymnal. She once left for 2 days without saying why, but they always came back. Ernest once apologized by cooking her least favorite chicken soup, and she ate every spoonful. Not because she liked it, but because he made it, and she didn't want him to feel sad. She didn't like soup, but she loved the way he looked at her when she ate it. The neighbors said Charlene was a quiet woman who always bowed her head in greeting each morning. Rain or shine, even if no one greeted her back. She walked the dog in the same loop, stopped to straighten Miss Edith's crooked mailbox, never asked if help was needed, because she knew the answer would be no. Yet every month she left a small bag of groceries at Edith's door. No name, no note. Her daughter, Catherine, recalled how her mother used to stick heart-shaped stickers on her granddaughter's lunchbox every school day. Until one day she didn't. The girl cried, thinking Grandma no longer loved her. Charlene gently said, "There won't be a sticker every day because love doesn't always need to be seen. Sometimes it needs to be missed, to be remembered." Their house wasn't big, but it was tidy. Every item had its place. Every frame was dusted weekly. The dining table always had a tablecloth, even if no guests were coming. The bookshelf was organized alphabetically, except for one Bible folded at page 23. The line, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil," was underlined in red ink. Not to mark it, but because she read it every night before bed. A quiet ritual to bring peace. One more time. Charlene didn't live loudly. She lived in small gestures. By always setting out 2 pairs of slippers when her daughter visited, by leaving a note on the bathroom mirror. "It's cold. Don't forget your scarf." By keeping every handwritten letter her husband had ever sent, neatly arranged in a locked wooden box under the bed. Ernest wasn't soft-spoken. He once filed a complaint about a neighbor raising chickens. He opposed building a new parking lot near the school. He once scolded his son at dinner for using slang. But he was also the first to show up whenever someone needed help. The man who held his wife's hand tightly throughout her father's funeral. The one who would take 3 steps back just to admire their house from afar. As if to make sure everything was still right, still intact, still alive. But now that house no longer glows with light. No more whistling kettle at 5 a.m., no more slippers placed neatly at the door, no more good night said like clockwork. Sleep well. I'll wake up before you, like always. And maybe it is these small, tender things they cherished that make their deaths so unforgivable, because someone didn't just kill 2 people. They extinguished every trace of warmth that ever lived in that home. The first week passed quietly like any other. But the hallway light started going out earlier than usual. Charlene didn't notice at first that she had begun checking the door locks twice every night, once before bed, and again about 10 minutes later after the wind slipped through the back window and startled her awake. She didn't tell Ernest, thinking it was just insomnia that came with age. But each night she lay turned toward the wall, fingers wrapped around her wooden bead rosary. A habit of protection she couldn't explain. She left the nightlight on all through the night, something she hadn't done once in 30 years living in that house. Ernest asked about it, and she laughed it off, joking that she was afraid of the stray cat in the yard, the one that kept staring through the window. In the days that followed, she began slowing down in everything. The tea didn't taste quite right. The biscuits were sometimes burned at the edges. And the calendar on the dining table still showed Wednesday, even though the weekend had come. She said she forgot to flip it, but deep down she knew something was off. Once she called Catherine and asked strange questions. "Do you remember how I taught you to tell when someone's being sincere?" Catherine found it odd, but assumed her mother was just emotional about her upcoming 60th birthday. Charlene added thicker curtains, saying it was to block the sun. But in truth, it was to block out what was outside, and to keep anything from looking in. One evening she stood in front of the shed door for nearly an hour. She didn't open it, didn't go in. Just stood there while the wind tousled her hair, which she didn't fix or brush aside. She simply stared through the small window, where the dull yellow light from the inside lamp glowed faintly, like metal spikes piercing the wall. By mid-month, music vanished from the house. The radio no longer played her favorite classical pieces during morning tea. In their place, silence. Heavy, thick silence. As if she feared even the familiar sounds might betray her. The hymns were neatly put away. The Bible was no longer by the bedside, but under her pillow. No longer a symbol of faith, but a talisman. She stopped going to Sunday evening service, after 30 years of never missing a Mass. She told the neighbors she felt tired, but when she lied, her eyes didn't look sad. They looked empty, terrifyingly empty. One day the front security camera was off. Ernest said it must have been a power outage, but she knew she'd seen it blinking earlier. For the first time, she took her phone to bed, held close to her chest, set to silent but left on vibrate, just in case someone called, or messaged, or something began approaching. That night, she didn't sleep, not even a blink. When Ernest was deep in slumber, she got up, put on her coat, sat in the car, turned on the engine, but didn't leave, didn't drive off. She just sat there in silence for 1 hour and 13 minutes. Then she turned off the engine, returned to the house, said nothing. Only mentioned she'd forgotten to close the garage door. In the days that followed, she began to tidy up. Not spring cleaning, not clearing the wardrobe, but the little things, throwing away old bills, tearing up handwritten letters, boxing up family photos, wiping each frame and putting them back out of order, as if silently saying goodbye to each face. She left some clothes at the doorstep with a note, for anyone in need. For the first time in her life, she didn't sign her name. Each evening, she lit a candle in the kitchen, but blew it out after exactly 5 minutes. She said the light was too harsh, but in truth, she was counting, as if shortening everything might make death arrive just a bit slower. Catherine called. No one picked up. Texts went unanswered. When she asked her father, he said Charlene seemed a bit sleepy lately, but probably just due to age. She stopped seeing friends, canceled her usual afternoon tea without explanation, leaving only a single line. Some things can't be fixed. I'm sorry. On the final night, the rosary beads were placed back on the dining table, but 3 were missing. The chipped teacup was cleaned and turned upside down, something she had never done before. The wedding photo remained askew. Ernest didn't fix it, thinking he'd do it in the morning. But the next morning, no one woke up. Some people don't die suddenly. They leave, little by little, through their eyes, their routines, their silences. And by the time someone notices, it's already too late. But the strangest thing is that the person who should have seen it first was the one who least wanted to look. Ernie arrived late to the funeral. Not too late, but late enough that Catherine looked toward the door 3 separate times. He wasn't dressed in black. He didn't wear a memorial pin. He said nothing to the priest. He stood beside the large stone pillar on the left side of the church, eyes locked on the oak coffin, yet not a single tear fell. When an officer approached and asked if he was all right, he whispered almost as if to himself, "I guess this is the end," then turned away. No one stopped him. No one asked anything else. Only one young investigator, who had been at the scene, furrowed his brow, jotted a note into his pocket notebook, and said nothing more throughout the ceremony. After the funeral, while people gathered in the small kitchen at Catherine's house, Ernie opened the fridge and poured himself a glass of water as if he still lived there. He set the glass down exactly where his mother used to sit every morning. His hand tapped the tabletop. 3 short knocks, exactly the way Ernest used to do when he wanted his son's attention. No one said a word, but Catherine's gaze for the first time shifted from grief to suspicion. When asked by police where he had been the night of March 7th, Ernie claimed he was home, alone. His wife was away. He said he could provide phone pings, call logs. He even mentioned the security cameras before they asked. "I'm sure there's some camera near the area, right?" A question that seemed logical, but came too soon, too precise, and far too informed for someone who supposedly didn't yet know when his parents were killed. A car wash worker later came forward, said that 3 days after the murders, a middle-aged man brought in a red Camaro for full detailing, specifically asking to clean the trunk and floor mats. He paid in cash, left no number. But the car still carried a faint scent of cheap peppermint cologne, the exact kind Charlene once said gave her headaches. The same scent, found lingering in her son's car days after her death. Robin, Ernie's wife, said that night he didn't call her, didn't ask about their son, didn't even mention his parents. But the next morning, he quietly opened his laptop and searched. California inheritance laws. Then pulled up an old email from his mother, sent 3 weeks earlier asking him to make a late mortgage payment. He never replied to that message, but he saved it, printed it, and placed it into a folder labeled by hand. Finance, urgent. Investigators found the broken wooden rosary in the living room, 7 beads scattered across the couch and floor, and 1 bead lying directly beside Ernie's left foot in a crime scene photo from his first visit to the house. The officer wasn't sure if Ernie had seen it, but when it was mentioned, Ernie looked down at the floor, gave a faint smile, and said, "Mom wore it all the time, even in bed. Dad used to joke she was more afraid of demons than cockroaches." While cleaning out their parents' bedroom, Catherine found the wedding photo frame turned face down, something Charlene had never done. Behind the frame was a note, handwritten by Ernest. "Don't let the boy come back. Not if he still owes." No date, no signature, but the handwriting trembled. The ink was smudged, rushed, as if he knew the person who'd read it wouldn't be Charlene. Charlene's best friend, Grace, said that just a week before her death, Charlene told her, "If one day I'm no longer here, don't ask who did it. Just look for who couldn't cry." Grace didn't understand at the time, thought her friend was simply tired. But now she couldn't forget those words, especially because at the funeral, the only one who didn't cry was the man who once called Charlene the first woman I ever truly trusted. The police didn't issue charges immediately. They said they needed more time, more evidence, more investigation. But in the internal case file, one name was already underlined. The same man who requested to see the will just 4 days after the bodies were discovered. The only one who knew exactly where Ernest kept the sword cabinet, the one he always locked before leaving the house. That cabinet was found open, and one of the 2 swords was never recovered. From that point on, what was once called family began to decay. Every action, every word, every silence became potential evidence. But what suffocated everyone most wasn't the blood. It was the feeling that the person hugging you at the funeral might be the one who took everything away. Ernie was never easy to read. But to those who had been close to him, they said he always knew how to make people feel chosen, seen, important. Charlene once said that even as a child, Ernie had eyes that could scan the expressions of others, just to say exactly what they wanted to hear. He was the only kid in preschool who knew how to wrap an arm around the teacher when she cried. The son who texted his mother every single day during college. But also the boy who, when upset, could remain silent for 3 weeks straight and never explain why. When his first cat died, Ernie didn't cry. He simply gathered the fur, placed it in a wooden box, locked it, and buried it in the backyard. No one was allowed to touch it, not even Charlene. He used to say love meant keeping, not holding hands, but holding minds, holding breaths, holding on to things the other person didn't even know they had revealed. An ex-girlfriend once said Ernie knew her email password, not to snoop, but because, "I just wanted to be sure you didn't feel alone when you were offline." He once gave her gloves at 3 a.m., the perfect size, though she had never said her hands were cold. He printed photos from her Instagram, framed them, and stuck one between his rearview mirror and windshield. So every red light is a reminder of you. When Charlene stopped lending him money, when she began demanding repayment of the house mortgage, when she wrote in an email, "You need to understand that love does not mean indulgence," Ernie didn't respond, didn't get angry. He simply changed the cologne on his handkerchief, from soft peppermint to sharp amber, the very scent Charlene was allergic to. He stopped texting goodnight, stopped asking about their health, stopped calling on his grandfather's death anniversary, a call he never missed. But he still sent flowers, the exact kind she liked, arriving on time, in her name, but with no card, no message, just silent white petals lying there like an unspoken warning. Ernie always arranged his clothes by color, light to dark, left to right. But after visiting his parents' house for the last time, the order changed. A white shirt now sat between two gray ones, as if something inside him had shifted just a little, but never quite returned. Catherine once said he folded napkins so precisely they could be used as rulers. But the night after Charlene died, the napkin on the kitchen table was crumpled, soaked, and stained with blood in the sink. No one ever heard him raise his voice. There were no reports of violence. But Robin, who lived with him for 9 years, remembered clearly she was never allowed home after 9 p.m., never allowed her phone to die, never allowed to laugh too long with another man at a party. If she broke any of those rules, he wouldn't yell. He would go completely silent. For days. And each night tap 3 steady beats on the table, like counting down to something about to shatter. On the final night, a neighbor heard an engine start at 12:19 a.m. No gate opened. No headlights came on. Just a flicker of light from the car's front. Then darkness. One officer later said the flash matched the glow of a 2006 Camaro, the same model Ernie once proudly called my childhood dream. No one knows the exact moment he made his decision. But someone recalled that a week before the murders, Ernie said to a friend, "If my parents weren't around, everything would be so much easier." The friend thought he was joking, but his eyes weren't. His eyes were hollow, like a room cleared out, waiting for the door to be locked. His love didn't explode. It didn't shatter. It decayed. Slowly, quietly, from the inside, from the need to keep everything for himself, from wounded pride, from feeling questioned, demanded, belittled. And one night, after too much silence had built up, the last thing he thought was, "If they're gone, I'll be free." But the freedom he sought began with 2 deaths. One blow, and one cut deep enough to be beyond saving. Sometimes, the killer doesn't come out of the dark. They sit right next to you. They touch you with loving words. But inside, love has rotted into possession. And possession, when threatened, always ends in blood. The security camera from a house across the gate of Castlewood Country Club didn't capture anything clearly on the night of March 7th. But the neighbor's motion sensor light did, recording a brief movement at 1:46 a.m. That was the exact window when Ernie's phone reconnected to the network after nearly 17 hours offline. Investigators began to piece together fragments, from the text he sent a woman in New Orleans on the day the bodies were discovered. "I need to disappear for a while. Don't look for me." To the car wash receipt paid in cash just 72 hours after the murders. A small detail, seemingly irrelevant, but it became a key link when matched with the timeline, the locations, and the sudden reactivation of his GPS, exactly at his home address. 6:36 a.m. They found a receipt from a Nike store in Primm, Nevada, dated March 7th. The items: a baseball bat, a pair of size 12 shoes, and a pair of children's goalkeeper gloves, none of which anyone in the family needed or had ever seen. Until traces of blood on the floor matched a thread from that type of glove. The shoe prints were one size too large for Ernie's feet, but exactly matched the pair in the receipt. The shoes were never found in his home, or anywhere else. Police didn't have conclusive DNA evidence, but they had a string of data points, enough to name a suspect. A small piece of paper, the warranty tag from the baseball bat, was found in the living room, blood-stained, folded, as if someone had tried to hide it and forgot. In a covert phone recording, Robin, his ex-wife, asked Ernie about the surveillance footage that might show him driving that night. A nearly 6-second pause followed before Ernie asked, Did they see my face?" That moment alone, officers said, was all the confession they needed. Ernie was arrested at a casino in Las Vegas. No resistance, no denial. He simply lowered his head, asked to call his son, and said one sentence to the investigator. "If she's gone, no one can take them from me anymore." No shouting, no tears. So cold that everyone in the interrogation room went silent for nearly a minute, as if something had fallen and no one wanted to pick it up. In court, Ernie remained mostly silent. His defense lawyer claimed psychological breakdown, loss of control. But what appeared on the courtroom screen, the GPS logs, the blurry image of the red Camaro, the texts, and the audio of a 3-year-old boy asking, "Where's Grandma?" made the entire trial feel like ashes. No arguments, no hope of misunderstanding. A life sentence was handed down, but no one clapped. The sheriff, who had worked the case from day one, said only one thing as he left the courtroom. "We were too late. We should have seen it last month." A young officer, attending her first murder trial, cried in the hallway. Not for the verdict, but because of the boy sitting in the back row, staring at the courtroom door, not asking, not angry, just watching, as if waiting for someone who still hadn't come home. The church where Charlene once sang hymns became a point of debate. Some wanted to tear it down, others to preserve it. But no one went to Mass there anymore, not even longtime parishioners. The community fractured. Some defended Ernie, others despised him, and many no longer knew what to believe. An old woman who used to pass their house every morning, once lighting a candle before the Virgin Mary, now walked past in silence. No bow, no glance, as if she feared that if she looked too long, she'd see someone stepping out of that kitchen again. That kitchen that was once a home. A place no one ever thought would bleed. Catherine moved away a year later. Her youngest, Charlene's grandson, no longer stuck heart stickers on his lunchbox like Grandma used to. No longer asked where she was. But every night, he tapped 3 times on the bed frame before falling asleep. The same rhythm someone once used to signal, to check, to reassure that everything was still within reach. No one taught him to do it. No one dared ask why. The killer is locked away, but his shadow still lingers in that house. His voice still echoes in the memory of a child. And the pain he left behind, no prison sentence can erase. And the hardest question of all, the one none of us want to ask, is this: if it were us, Could we have become him?